David. I want to thank everybody for coming. And actually, I'd just like to, Xin-Fan Liu is a visiting scholar from China, from Xi'an, China. So for those of you who don't know him, you can just introduce yourselves. If you see him around the hall, say hi, make him welcome. Before I get started, I just wanted to say that this talk is really an accumulation of not just the 2 years that I spent in the RAPS, but it goes way back further than that. And what I want to do is, first of all, I want to thank Orly for all the collaboration on the ideas that come out of this. The two of us spent a fair bit of time. We looked at last year, we looked at the first semester stuff, and more recently we looked at second semester stuff. But then I also want to thank Dave Underwood for helping me figure out graphics. Caroline Singleton for the research is really slim pickings, is to say. And I remember, Christy, when you did your black bag, the kind of stuff you were trying to find was really hard to get. And I found the same way. So the stuff that I did get is mainly due to Caroline. But I also want to really say I owe a debt of gratitude to a lot of people that's in the room here, because over the years, as you know, I've been on the Peer Observation Committee and Professional Development Committee, so I've observed a lot of people, and I really feel like I've learned a lot from within the PWR and a lot about my teaching. And then, so in 2010, when I got the opportunity to go into the RAPS, I had a lot of trepidation, to be honest, about doing it, and because it was kind of unknown territory. But what I wanted to start with is my theme is contact, and I want to offer this presentation as like bridging the gap with first-year students. And this is one of my favorite quotes. Over the last couple of years, I've gotten a lot of student feedback. Like, I just do these small surveys in the class, and I'd say to Mike, what's your most difficult transition from college to high school, or what's your most difficult thing about second semester? And then this is one of the things that made me realize how, you know, we have one perception of we give them the material, we give them the syllabus, and so this one student wrote, they told us what to read, but not what to know. And so that's my starting place. The second thing I wanted to show was this. I thought a lot about going into the RAPS. And I thought a lot about not going in. And in the end, I just took the plunge.
Is that you?
That's me. And
just jumped.
yeah. And so
Where are you at?
that's California in Sardinia. And but I was really hesitant to use that. But then I thought about it. One of the things I wanted to say was, when I did the RAPS, I was so involved in it for 2 years that there's no metacognition. I wasn't really reflecting. There was rarely time to reflect. So then when I was on teaching leave last semester, or this time last year, and I had to really think about it. And in the end, you know, in the beginning I was a little, I have to do this research. And then the more I got involved in it, the more I realized I learned a lot. As a teacher mostly, but also just as a human being. And being forced into that immersion experience was probably the most enriching thing from a teaching perspective of my career. But I wouldn't have realized that unless I was asked to do this research. And so here's a couple of things that I wanted to think about. The RAPS, I don't know what this double color is, but it's not on my screen. But RAPS are different because I believe they inhabit like tension between three major components at the university: faculty affairs and student affairs, students and faculty, and in the RAPS you're on their turf. And thirdly, we're in an institution where research and teaching goes on. So metaphor is the Grand Canyon. So I would argue that there's quite a chasm between those three entities. And so if you think about faculty and students, it's oftentimes problematic, to say the least. But then also faculty affairs and student affairs, these are what I call, based on my own, like I use the big house term, and that comes from post-colonial studies, but faculty affairs and student affairs rarely speak to each other. And in an institution this big, the problem is that faculty affairs deal with academics, student affairs is going to deal with everything non-academic, to put it that way. But they rarely have conversations to talk about what's going on for undergraduates, for example. And they've been forced into those conversations with the RAP experience. And the other divide, I would say, is research and teaching. And so, what we're going to talk about is a little bit about, even though I learned a lot of this stuff in the RAPS, what I'm realizing, because I'm out of them for the last year and a half, that's where Ori is. The stuff I do in first year classes now, especially, I think what we're learning, and those of you teaching RAPS, can offer it to all our faculty around first year students, because I believe it's transferable, the stuff we're learning from there. So, some of you have seen this, and Ori and I went through this last October, and I got these images, but I think I want to give it a little bit more time. So, part of it is, I believe, trying to understand our subject, if you think of first year students as our subjects. And oftentimes, we don't have to understand them. You just give them material, they get it done, and give it back to us. So, if you look at the challenges that they have, say this is first semester. They're dealing with stuff that you don't ever read in the classroom. It's hard to read them, actually, because they're trying to put on a straight face. But they're oftentimes dealing with homesickness. And when they come here, beyond being uprooted and everything from home, and come to a big institution like this, their sense of isolation can be compounded if they haven't figured out friends in the first few weeks, but they see other people who are making friends. And so they're really struggling, usually the first month, to create their own communities and gain that sense of belonging in a place like this. So one of the things that I learned most about in the RAPS was that I never thought about when I was teaching outside of it, just as a regular faculty, is the pressure they're under from their parents. Mm-hmm. So the notion of the helicopter parents, and to be honest, I don't know all the reasons for it, but I think there's multiple reasons for financial pressures, standards that parents have set for them. And for the bright kids, they're pretty easy to attain in high school for the most part. And parents are not either preparing them or getting them to realize that the jump right from high school into college is a bigger leap than they realize they're taking. So, this is their roommate issue. Which when I was working in the dorms, I was really taken aback by this. They get so upset if they can't make friends with the person they're roommating with. And sometimes it's more than one. And it's even difficult then, say if there's 4 in a bigger room and one is not happy there, then they're totally isolated because the other 3 seem to be getting along. So you have that compounding issues. So what we would, so it's another factor that nobody they don't understand the culture here, they don't understand the system, so they don't know who to go to deal with that. And so the social aspect then of their lives becomes really big because they want to be along here. And the pure pressure to go to these parties and to do the things that we probably would see as distracting, non-academic, and not beneficial, say, to their academic careers, doesn't work for them. This is really important for them to find a place, find a group, and to get involved in, and when we might think, you know, social clubs, hiking clubs, they're like right there, yeah, you know? And so they want to be where the action is, so to speak, at that age. And what happens is, when you come to exam time, which is usually the midterms hit, you know, week 5, 6, 7. A lot of us have early papers, but those papers are oftentimes not the kind of rigor that you'd have later on in the semester. So they think this is not too bad. But with the bigger classes, they're like cruising along, going to lectures for 5 weeks, then they have an exam. First of all, they don't know how to prepare for it, and so they get into trouble in terms of giving it enough time to study. Secondly, their only gauge is, I've done great in high school. So when you go into that first exam, they think, I can do this, you know, no problem, and they get into big trouble, right? So what happens is, if you think that is us, reflective of faculty, that's how they see us. Older, parents' age and older, not really approachable. This actually is a Speaker of the House in Australia. No disrespect to Grandma. I thought, I was going to use Maggie Thatcher, and then I thought, this is a better image. But we're not approachable to them when they come here and they're trying to orient themselves to the culture of the university. And so, and that, of course, guys, that's all qualified. I'll get back to what we do and why it works. So, oftentimes, so there's a difference with the RAPS. The students that are in RAPS are going to have possibly 2 small classes their first semester, or else 1 the first semester and 2 the second. So they can take 2 classes in the RAPS, but they only have to take 1 to be in the RAPS each semester. The likelihood of them having another small class first semester or second semester is pretty slim. So you're going to be that faculty with a small class seminar. The style of the class is different, the relationship with the student is different, and oftentimes, and the research is there, guys, if they connect with one faculty, it makes a huge difference in terms of a sense of belonging for, like, academically. You know, where they're grown into being taking academics seriously, right? So, for those of you who know that movie, I use that because, for obvious reasons. Then the other aspect for first-year students that happens in the first semester, usually towards the end, is their sense of identity and how they start to change when they come to campus. And that manifests itself in issues of ethnicity and sexual identity. And they're gaining all this knowledge, and they're trying to make sense of it, and they're also realizing that there's an opportunity here to explore who I am. Oftentimes, guys, that's outside of academics as well, but it can be initiated from a class they're taking or something like that. And this is bigger than oftentimes bigger than we realize. And so it was really, so that's your first semester stuff. Second semester is not anyway close. So I want to, Ori and I came up with these before Christmas and right after Christmas. And these are based on, Ori asked for responses from her students, I got responses from my students in terms of that transition. So we put them together. And so the issues are different for second semester students. And in fact, I wasn't really keyed into them when I was living in the dorm myself. But the self-identity is a different issue, guys, second semester. When they go home, their sense of independence gets challenged again because their parents have the notion of, they perceive them as the kids that left, 16, 17, 18. There's rules that have been at home, be in a certain time, and they are upset, but they don't know how to, a lot of them talk to me about not being able to challenge their parents around that, and they don't know how to challenge their parents respectfully around those rules and regulations. But what it does is, it impacts how they perceive themselves in more ways than that. When they go home, they're seeing all their friends from high school, some of them who go to college, some of them who don't, and they're seeing the changes in themselves. And so sometimes, especially for example, from a rural area, and they realize that what was offered to me at home is pretty restrictive. But oftentimes their belief system is starting to shift and their values are shifting. And there's tension in their home because of that. And so one of the things that was most surprising to me was when students came back after Christmas, Thanksgiving and then Christmas. Thanksgiving was a different thing. The thing that totally surprised me was there was a lot of students that I really liked who weren't looking forward to going home. And it kind of caught me by surprise. Because 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, in the dorms, kids start talking about getting excited about going home. And if you're not one of them, you feel like there's something wrong with you because everybody else is talking about going home. So it was really instructive for me to connect with those kids, and then when they came back to talk to them after. And a lot of it was, they just have a kind of angst relationship with their parents or family issues. So what happens is the dorm becomes second home. So when they come back, they talk about this as coming back home. So they have two homes now. And that was, I never thought about that. But the dormitory represents a place, because there are a lot of students, for example, who are in a place like Kittredge. In the beginning, they were reluctant to be there because they're not central campus, Farrand, Libby. They're the prime dormitories, folks, for first-year students, because that's where the action is in the middle of campus. So they feel isolated, but by the second semester, they like the idea of being able to go back to their little community in the Kittredge complex. And they would articulate it that way as well. So, so we talked a little bit about but the other thing is, and Orly keyed into this a lot more than I did, divorce. Parents, once kids are going to college, then they're left at home, tensions, and all of a sudden, a lot of our students are dealing with divorcing parents. So then it's that new experience of two homes, and emotionally, they're all over the place. And they don't really have the language for it either. I talked already about, in the second semester, money's an issue. So for example, you see the students, out-of-state students who sometimes will be slow to let you know, but they have to go home because their parents have figured out they can't afford out-of-state. So they're going back to in-state school. And it's really hard on them if they really like it here. But a lot of them don't have any choice at that point. But the other thing is, second semester, they haven't really been paying attention to money in the first semester. They're so excited about coming here and everything else. And the parents are probably not putting that emphasis on them. But the second semester, not only do they have to buy their own books, find a job maybe, because housing is a big issue, because first year students have to find a place for next August. And all those leases are signed in February. And I was never tuned into that. But it's a major issue for them, and a really stressful one. The other aspect of second semester is, this is national figures, 20% are on academic probation. So they get their grades over break. That's, for those who it's bad news, that isn't fun for them. So this semester, guys, they don't just have to pass the classes, they have to bump it up. They have to do better to get their GPA out, so they're not at 2.0 by the end of first year. Otherwise, they don't get to stay here. right, if they stay below that. So they, and this then plays into that. If it's stressful, if they know that the pressure's on, a lot of them will escalate the substance abuse in the second semester because of those pressures and anxieties. Even if, guys, even if that self-awareness around it, you're trying to talk to them about it and they're like, yeah, I understand, but then their peers are on the same page. And so everybody's going out Friday and Saturday if they want. And so it's extremely difficult in a big campus like this to be self-disciplined, for example, for a 18, 19-year-old. And then there's a lot of anxiety around finding a place for next semester. Guys, for the first time, they're really negotiating complex social relationships with potential housemates, but also they're learning to negotiate for the first time themselves with landlords and stuff like that. Leases, understanding all that, and the commitment that's involved there. So they're excited, but they're also going to be freaked out about it. And another thing that I've paid attention to a lot more this year was that when I asked them to respond to me about what were the issues for them, a lot of them talked about scheduling. Because their parents helped them with their fall semester. And then when it comes to second semester, they kind of take a little bit of control of that themselves. But then they have this concern, like, am I taking the right class or not? Is this a good idea? So they're going to, and also homesickness can come back at them again. Because after they've been, Thanksgiving is quick, but when you go home at Christmas time, it's not long enough oftentimes to get a job. So then they're at home for 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. And a lot of them talk about just lounging around, getting a lot of sleep, and getting good food, and all the privileges that go along with being at home, right? Then you have the contrast with that, of coming and trying to get back into, as one of them said to me, the school-centered mind, right? They come back to cramped dormitories. They talk about like the inability to unpack properly, meaning like they don't know how to stay tidy. So this big bag, they unload it, they dump it, and sometimes they're living in clutter for the first 2 weeks. And so you don't think about those things when they show up in your classroom because they've left it, but it doesn't help them clear their head and get organized and get focused. And then the other aspect is they still don't lack the skills to approach faculty, which is us. And so if you think about the students that we get, first year students, what faculty think is, they come here for knowledge, they want to learn. And what students think is life, death, parents, transitions, roommates, romances. So if you think about faculty affairs, we're talking about reputation and prestige. And student affairs, it's housing, food, health, and services. That's where those two big houses really talk to each other. And then from the research and teaching, it's creation of knowledge, tenure, and rewards. And then the teaching is focused on dissemination of knowledge. So there's those 3 camps I was telling you about that exist. And I should say, I forgot to preface that, one of the reasons I probably took that job was because of the CU 101 course, and those of you who took that with us. I learned a lot about the difference between the liberal arts and a research institution, but also what was the issues for first year students and how you make a connection with them to work with them. But also what I've learned on my own in the last year is been reading a bit about teenage development of the brain. And so if you think about the brain as a place where the wiring depends on the culture that they find themselves in. For students, guys, when they're in their classroom in a week, they've got 15 hours of academics. another 153 hours a week that they're not in classrooms. That's really a 10-to-1 ratio. And I believe that's where issues come up. That's where the problem is. Time management, all those things that you talk about, procrastination, everything. But it also has to do with, if you're looking at the brain, and guys, there's incredible new knowledge on the brain in the last 10 years, so it was kind of fascinating. But some of the things I'm just highlighting here, which pertains to our students, like one of the things I couldn't get over is the fact that they think nothing's staying up until first semester, even when they come back second semester, 4 or 5 o'clock, chatting. They're just up. And they're like, oh, I missed my 8 o'clock class. Like, yeah. It's like, you know, I have no idea why. But if we look at that and take these kind of issues for, and I won't even mention alcohol, because that's another brain issue. The executive function, when they're losing loads of sleep, they're also losing executive function, memory, mood swings, quantitative skills, and their logical reasoning, all the way down. And that's scientific research that's shown that, because you're looking at the brain now. So if you can actually figure out ways to get them invested in understanding their own brains, then there's some chance that they will do some metacognition about what's working. And then the other big issue that I'm starting to acknowledge, for want of a better way of putting it, is the stress that we don't have to deal with the stress that they're under. And we're all stressed as the semester goes along. But the worst kind of stress is feeling you have no control over the problem and you're helpless. I would say that helplessness is a really big deal for them in the first semester and even the second semester, because they don't understand the culture of power here. And so if they've issues in housing, they don't know the chain of command. When they're doing badly with their subjects, they don't know how to come and speak to us. And then, for example, if they're struggling with say personal issues, they're very slow. First-year students are very slow to go seek counselling, and that's where we could be conduits for that. I would say it's really important. So, if living in, and so here's just some of the literature around living and learning communities. To build community, integrate academic work integrate academic work with class experience. And so I'm going to close it, come back to the bridging. And I didn't go into much detail on the divide between student affairs, academic affairs, and like I'm throwing myself. But research and teaching, yeah. And so for them to understand what it means to be in a research institution, they figure that out usually with most of us by the end of the semester, for all of us who do research and then a final persuasive paper. But that takes, you're really into week 10, 11, 12 if you're getting into the meat of that. And for them to be able to understand what it means to be in a CU research institution versus, say, Colorado College, which is a liberal arts school, they don't get it. But the RAPS offer that kind of bridging. So I would argue that we, those PWR, bridge those three institutions through our teaching in the RAPS. And there's I think that's all I'm going to say. I think you have questions.